Hello, my name is Elizabeth DeCoux. My pronouns are she and her. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the weekly worship service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, which we refer to sometimes as BBUUC. While our church building is closed, we still have many virtual activities available, which you can read about on our website, bbuuc.org. There you will find information about religious education for all ages, parenting classes, affinity groups, and other gatherings. Let me issue a special invitation for you to join our fellowship hour at 11:30 on Sunday, when we discuss the weekly service and enjoy each other's company. You can find the link to the fellowship hour in the journey this week and on our website. Wherever you are and whatever you're feeling, we are so glad you joined us. On this day of lesbian visibility, we light our chalice with words adopted from Bonnie Morris. Right now, many female activists in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s are gazing thoughtfully into the glowing embers of lesbian culture. For us, this is still an active campfire where we gather and warm ourselves, one which we hope will not fade away into forgotten ash, but instead retain hot coals to stoke new fires. With the lighting of this chalice, may those fires burn forever bright.
Good morning and welcome to the Wonder Box. I wonder what could be in our box of possibilities today. Let's look. Ooh, can you see what that is? That's corn. And today I want to share with you a story about a chicken and a chick who found some corn. It's inspired by the story of the little red hen. So once upon a time, there was a chicken and their chick. They lived on a farm. And one day while they were out scratching and pecking, the chick found what looked like some golden little nuggets. "Burp, burp, what's this?" asked the chick. And the chicken explained, "Those are corn seeds. If you have enough of them, you can make some delicious bread." Ooh, that sounds cool. Can we make some bread? Sure, but first we'll need to plant the seeds you found, and then we'll need to water them until they grow big and strong. Then we'll cut and grind the corn and knead it into dough. Ooh, can we do all that? Well, we'll need some help. How do we get help? We ask. Oh, I don't think anyone will volunteer to help, said the chick. Sure they will. You just have to have faith in them. So the chicken and the chick decided to ask the other farm animals to join them. They explained about finding the corn seeds and their idea of growing more corn and making bread for everyone. So, who will help us plant the corn? Asked the chicken and the chick. I don't know how, said the bull. I don't know how, said the cat. I don't know how, said the rat. All of those animals just looked at the birds like they were crazy. We don't know how to grow corn or make bread, they said. Well, Chicken said, then let's get creative and figure this out. First, we need to dig a trench. Who can help? Oh, the bull said, I can use my horns for that. Wonderful. Now we'll need to water the seeds. Rat quickly volunteered to chew a hole through the rain barrel so the water could run down the trench and water the seeds. Awesome. Now that's some creative thinking, said Chick. Then Chicken said, we need to figure out how to cut the corn. Oh, that's easy, said Rat. Bull and I can cut the corn. He can use his horns and I can use my teeth. Bull nodded in agreement, stating that he would be willing to carry the corn to the mill as long as Cat scared away any bugs along the way. Cat stretched and agreed. When they got the corn to the mill, Bull pulled the grinding stones while his friends sat on his back and cheered him on. Way to go! You've got this! And when it came time to knead the bread, Cat said, step aside. I'm an expert. Then they all worked together to put the dough in pans and place them in the oven. As the delicious aroma of the baking bread filled the air, all the friends rested with contentment under the shade of the old oak tree. They had come together to collaborate and offer their skills to create something that no one of them could have ever done alone. And in the process, they had become a community, bonded together by their creativity, their imagination, and their perseverance. This story reminds me of our third principle and the idea that when we accept each other and learn together, great things are possible. I wonder, have you ever had a time when you worked together with other people to make something happen that you thought was impossible? And I wonder, how did it make you feel inside? With this, our story is told. Until the next time.
As a community, we bear one another's burdens and delight in one another's joys. We light flames each week to symbolize that sharing. Today, we light a flame for all of our members and guests who attended last week's virtual Nehemiah Assembly on the 19th. Our thanks to our wonderful iCare Network members for their good works and for our congregation's support of this interfaith justice ministry. When we work together, great things happen. We light a flame to celebrate this week's milestones, which include happy birthday wishes for Laurel H. on April 25th and Merrick K. on April 28th. We also light a flame of celebration for the wedding anniversary of Don and Judy C. on April 27th. Our wishes for happy celebrations for each of you. We light a flame for the justice that came this week for the murder of George Floyd. And we commit ourselves in this moment to the ongoing struggle to end oppression. We light a final flame for those joys and concerns which remain unspoken in our hearts. Even while our doors are closed, the work of this church goes on. We are grateful for your pledges and gifts, which empower that important work. The recipient of this month's virtual plate offering is the St. John's River Keeper, which defends and protects the St. John's River for us, for future generations, and for the earth. You can donate through the PayPal link below on our webpage. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Today, we are so happy to welcome to our pulpit Reverend Ranwa Hammamy. Reverend Hammamy serves as the Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of California, which supports UUs around the state in their various justice ministries by providing advocacy, education, and witness opportunities to live out our UU values. Ranwa has previously served as president of DRUM, which is a national organization for UU people of color. A self-described UU Muslim, Ranwa seeks to serve both living traditions in her ministry, encouraging others both to grow and learn from each other's gifts. When not working, Ranwa enjoys spending time baking absurd concoctions, singing for liberation, and relaxing with their spouse and 5 fur babies. That's even more than I have. Welcome, Reverend Hammamy.
As some of you may know, we are currently in the middle of Ramadan, a sacred month for many Muslims around the world. Folks are probably familiar with some of the practices, fasting from food and drink, and yes, even water, between sunrise and sunset, special prayers and intentions, and increased charitable giving. And there are many reasons that Muslims observe this month, one of them being that it marks the month during which the first revelations of the Quran, one of the sacred texts in the Islamic traditions, were made to the Prophet Muhammad. During this month today, many Muslims will actually read through the Quran, these revelations, as a daily practice. Many will take time to read and reflect on what some see as divine guiding truths, helping us move towards our best selves, encouraging us to challenge oppression, and fortifying us as we try to create a better world. Now, Muhammad is called a prophet, not only because he received those revelations, but also because he shared and strived to live by those divine truths. And he sometimes did so at great cost to himself and a society that punished him for speaking up against oppression and violence. Not unlike some of the prophets who share their own revelations today. And I don't mean people necessarily sharing messages sent to them from some God on high, but people sharing truths that call upon us to remember our core values, truths that reveal sometimes uncomfortable realities, and truths that challenge us to do better. The revelations being shared today are inviting us to move towards a world that lives in our most liberated imagination. But before we can get there, we must listen to, learn from, and be changed by those revelations that call us to engage in a deep and difficult reckoning. These days, we are in a time when the combination of multiple catastrophes coming to a head, our humanity-driven climate crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, the centuries-long systemically backed racist violence against Black and brown lives in this country, all of that coming together has brought to our mainstream attention just how much we as a society and world desperately need to acknowledge and address. Now, for some of us, These realities, these revelations, have long been a part of our awareness, if not our own lived experience. And now for all of us, these realities are undeniable and at the forefront of our lives and our futures. And as part of this great reckoning, our leaders, our institutions, and societies are being once again called upon to acknowledge essential and challenging truths about our pasts and the impact that they have on our lives in the present and in the future. This last year in particular, we as a society have received an abundance of invitations to re-examine the stories we tell of our history and the narratives that we glorify and memorialize. In this year of both devastating and life-giving change, we have been invited to expand our collective awareness and now listen to and center the experiences, histories, stories that have been denied through tone policing, erasure, and genocide. There are sides to our collective story, the story of our world, our country, and our humanity that have for too long gone unacknowledged. In this time of breaking and breaking open, we are all being invited to do the hard work of learning these new stories so that we can all begin to undo and heal from the harm our old stories continue to cause. And to do this learning and healing work, this holy, sacred, soul recovery work, both our society and our own faith tradition must commit ourselves to listening to and amplifying the stories and experiences that have not been historically centered or told. The revelations of realities that have always been there and are now only just being allowed to permeate our awareness. We all must come to an understanding that the majority narrative that many of us grew up in doesn't tell the whole story, and that there are more perspectives out there that complexify and expand our collective story. It is essential to our survival, because when we open ourselves up to these truths, we open ourselves not only to an understanding of the suffering, harm, and tragedy that they bring to our collective story, but we also open ourselves up to the wisdom, faith, perseverance, creativity, and possibility that together they weave into our shared narrative. We expand our collective story, not only in the telling of our past, but in the imagining of our future. And that is what makes the story of Hagar, or Hajar in the Islamic traditions, so compelling to me these days. In many Judeo-Christian contexts, Hagar is more often than not described through the lens of her relationship to Abraham, and the ways in which she and their child were presented as tests of his faith. But she is much, much, much more than that. A reality that Black womanist theologians like Dolores Williams have been lifting up for generations, and what Muslima feminist theologians describe in their engagement of the Islamic traditions. Now, in many stories of the Islamic traditions, Hajar is described as a servant turned wife and surrogate for Sarah when Sarah was unable to conceive a child with Abraham, or Ibrahim. As in the Judeo-Christian tellings of Hagar's story, Hajar was the first of Ibrahim's wives to have a child, a boy named Ishmael. And as in the Judeo-Christian stories, the birth of Hajar's son is said to have caused Sarah some jealousy, no doubt because they were both living in a patriarchal time where a woman's worth was tied to her ability to bear children. Now, as many stories go, Ibrahim was aware of this tension, but struggled with what to do about the mess that he had caused. It is said that one night he was told by God to bring Hajar and their son Ishmael to a barren spot in the desert and leave them there with some water and dates. And he did so. And when Ibrahim turned to leave them, Hajar asked him repeatedly, "Why are you leaving us here? Why are you leaving us here? Why are you leaving us here?" And every single time, Ibrahim did not respond. It was only when Hajar asked him, "Did God tell you to bring us here?" did Ibrahim answer with a simple yes. And Hajar then responded, "Then go. God will protect us." Eventually, the water and dates that Hajar had with her ran out, and soon she could no longer provide milk for her son. Now, I cannot even begin to imagine what she felt like in that moment, thirsty, hungry with her young child wailing in her arms. Nothing and no one around her but arid desert. But what happens next in her story does tell me a little bit more about what she might have been thinking when she told Ibrahim, "Then go, God will protect us." Hajar began to search for water in the desert. She placed her child on the ground and began running back and forth, searching between two large hills in the area, searching for any sign of water or nourishment that will help her and her baby survive. She is desperate and she is determined. And eventually, an angel appears and tells her that her faith will be rewarded, and shows Hajar a spring of water flowing right next to her infant son's heel. Now, what Hajar did in that moment of discovery demonstrates her imagination, creativity, and foresight. She not only drank from that spring of water and shared it with her child, she created a well around that spring, and she knew what she was doing. She was preserving its presence and maintaining access to its life force, and not just for her. She lived in a nomadic world, and so she knew that when travelers would eventually pass through her little spot of the desert, she would be able to trade water for more food and supplies to survive in that previously desolate spot. And that is exactly what happened in her story. Hajar and her son not only survived because of her perseverance and creativity, they thrived. Travelers not only passed through this place, some of them stayed, and a town, an entire city grew. A city that began when one woman, one single mother, acted, created, and imagined in spite of the odds that she was facing, motivated by her firmly held faith in the promise of God's protection. A city where every year today, participants in holy pilgrimage reenact her search for water in the desert to honor her faith. The name of that city, as some of you may have figured out, is Mecca. Now, none of us were there when Ibrahim left Hajar and her son in the desert, and in fact, we don't know how much of this story is factually true. But what I like to imagine is that Hajar embodied an attitude of grief, anger, and resilience that so many organizers and activists exhibit today. The moment she found out that Ibrahim believed that God told him to leave a woman and her child in the desert, I love imagining her reaction being the equivalent of, "Boy, bye. I am better off without you, and I know I've got something better than you looking out for me." I imagine that in the middle of the fear and confusion of being left to potentially die in the desert, that Hajar is unapologetic in her anger at how Ibrahim has treated her and says, "Then go," because she knows she is worthy of a promise of better protection. And Hajar didn't just wait for that promise of protection. Her belief that God would protect her and her infant son didn't cause her to become a passive victim waiting to be saved in her circumstances. Instead, her belief in that promise moves her to do the opposite. Hajar takes action rooted in her anger, her faith, her awareness of the danger that she was facing, and her ingenuity, knowing that to experience that promise, she had a part to play in helping to create it. Hajar's faith doesn't tell her to wait. Her faith tells her to act. Her faith tells her that she herself is integral to that promise of protection, and in her decision to claim her part, her power, she survives not only by finding water for a day or two, but by using that water to create tools and strategies that she needs to thrive in the desert. She innovates, she provides for herself and her son, she makes connections and builds a mutually supportive community, an early mutual aid network in the desert that allows not only herself but many more to eventually call that spot home. When Hajar told Abraham to go because God would protect her and her child, she wasn't a woman submitting to abandonment. She was a woman who chose to help make a promise real by living into her greatest capacities for resilience, creativity, imagination, and hope. And I like to believe that this part of Hajar's story adds to our collective story as our potential as people and communities. Hajar is a woman in a patriarchal society, left stranded in the desert with her child, a promise, her faith, and her creative power. A power that resides within each and every one of us, to imagine, to persevere, to manifest, not just to survive, but to thrive. Those gifts are ones we can demonstrate or surprise ourselves with every day, whether it's by playing with the latest Zoom background and filter when you didn't know you could, or by maintaining a congregational community in a virtual space for over a year. Inherent to our faith's affirmation of an individual's free and responsible search for truth and meaning, there is a promise of our innate, creative, and resilient potential. And accessing that potential, strengthening and growing it, is an act that needs to happen in community. Hajar's story, her creativity, her ingenuity and power were not simply shown by her running between two hills and creating a makeshift well. The promise she believed in came into full fruition when she collaborated with others to make it so. She didn't go from surviving to thriving on her own. She did so in community with others who helped make that promise of protection come true for all of them. That, to me, sounds like the universal salvation that our universalist predecessors imagined, where everyone experiences the promise of an abundant love created here on earth with our own hands and hearts. Knowing Hajar's story, opening ourselves up to her perspective and experience, complexifies our story today. It opens us up to realities and possibilities, the struggles and promises that we are encountering in our own desert, in our greater moment of reckoning. It reminds us that there are stories we haven't listened to for so long, but must now be centered today, if we hope to move through these times in love and truly universalist community. Hajar's story is one we absolutely need to learn from. The imagination, the resilience and creativity that knows another way of being is not only possible, it is essential. The invitation to join her in that desert, to partner with her in a perseverant search for life-giving water, its preservation and its cultivation into the sacred promise of something more. Her story reminds us that we will miss the promise of water in our desert if we hold too tight to what we think we know and refuse to open ourselves up to the revelations of today's prophets. We are being called to listen to those revelations, to be radically changed by their truths, and to transform this world into one that truly makes God's promise, love's promise, come true. I'm recording this sermon on Tuesday, April 20th, just a couple of hours after Derek Chauvin was found guilty of 2 murder charges and a manslaughter charge in the violent and traumatic death of George Floyd. Just a couple of hours as some of us felt us move a tiny inch closer to accountability, knowing that the day's verdict was far from justice. Just a couple of hours after Ma'Khia Bryant, a Black 16-year-old girl, was shot and killed by the same police she had called for help in the midst of an assault. Just a couple of hours after the shock of the obvious being affirmed in Minnesota collided with the familiarity of another Black life, another Black child's life being violently taken by the state in Ohio. The revelations that we are being called to listen to and learn from in this moment call upon us as people of faith and moral conscience to, at minimum, acknowledge the violent foundation and reality of policing in our country. The revelations we are being asked to repeat and act upon are calling upon us as people who believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, who believe in the search for truth and meaning, who believe in the creation of a world with justice and compassion, to refuse to accept what we call our criminal justice system any longer, because it is violent, inhumane, racist, and self-preserving. The revelations we are being invited to live into, those calls to defund the police and abolish prisons, they are an opportunity for us to create a world truly aligned with our most sacred values. A world where restorative justice, where reparations, where supportive community and public services are at the foundation of our health and safety. We are being invited to listen to the stories, the experiences, the perspectives, and the possibilities that come from voices and people who have been in this desert for much longer than we have. We are being invited to know that there is water here if we are willing to join the search for it. We all hold this invitation now in this moment to collectively imagine, to listen to and become the prophets of our time. As we are being called to challenge and grow beyond what we know, we are being invited to remember the creativity and resilience within each and every one of us. To know that we have a part to play in manifesting that promise of the divine, sacred, moral arc of the universe that bends towards justice with love. Like Hajar, like that community that found her in the desert, we too can find our faith's promise of water in the desert if we commit ourselves to creating it.
fall down. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. If I don't lift him up, I will fall down. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, I will fall down. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, I will fall down.
We extinguish our chalice today using the words of Reverend Maureen Killoran. This is the message of our faith, to act with passion in the face of injustice, to love with courage in the midst of life's pain. This is the meaning of our chalice flame. May it empower our hearts until we are together again. Amen.